weekly conversation with the Grenadian diaspora on COVID-19 vaccination. You may be joining us on the Ministry of Health's Facebook page or on GIS, GBN, WPG10, Real FM, Ride Along, or on the Bob Report, or on other Facebook sites, as well as viewing on television or listening by radio. Whichever platform you are tuned into, in whatever time zone you are located, a warm Grenadian welcome to all of you. I will now invite Reverend Terence Griffith, Senior Pastor at the First African Baptist Church of Philadelphia, to open the session with a word of prayer. Reverend Griffith.
God of all, we cry out to you for help. In your mercy, hear our prayer. Protect us, Lord, and be with us, especially those of us most vulnerable during this coronavirus. Move us to reach out in love to our neighbors near and far, so that the humble may be exalted, the hungry filled with good things. Grant us the courage not to rush back to our old ways, but to rebuild our world together, creating foundations of justice with equality and peace for all. And God, we pray that you'd bless our conversation today through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Reverend Griffith. We will now have the national anthem of Grenada. As we begin this conversation this afternoon, let's reflect on the millions of persons all over the world who would have lost their lives to this deadly virus. To our Grenadian sisters and brothers in the diaspora, let's remember them at this time. And to our Trinidad and Tobago, our Caribbean community, our colleagues in Trinidad and Tobago, our thoughts and prayers are with them at this time. Now, this conversation is a collaboration between the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Health as part of public education on vaccination. We know that public education is very important. In fact, to fill the gap between the vaccine and the vaccination, we need public information so we can make informed decision. This afternoon's session is spearheaded by Grenada's diplomatic representatives in the various capitals of the world. And it is really an exchange among Grenadians for the benefit of Grenada. It is a conversation by Grenadians with and for Grenadians. And we really want to thank the diaspora and all our Grenadian sisters and brothers who do not live at home, but who contribute significantly in different ways through remittances, advocacy, philanthropy, and through knowledge exchange. And this evening, we are engaging in conversation because many of you at home have very valid questions that you would want answers for. And we have a lineup of experts who could share with you their experiences. As we go through the afternoon, we have a number of testimonials from Grenadians in the diaspora who will be sharing with you some of their experiences working, whether as a nurse, as a doctor, as the case may be. So we have a very interesting lineup. I want to now introduce the panelists. We have Dr. Malara Alexis. She's an infectious disease physician at St. Bernardine Medical Center and Community Hospital in California. Also on the panel is Dr. Roland Purcell. critical care and general and vascular surgeon at the Interfaith Medical Center in New York. Ms. Jacqueline McKenzie is a solicitor in England and Wales and a barrister in Grenada. Reverend Terence Griffith is a senior pastor at the First African Baptist Church of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. Dr. Leslie Ann Williams is an internist, internal medicine and pediatrics in Virginia, she's based. And Dr. George Mitchell, who is a member of the COVID-19 task force and former chief medical officer and COVID-19 coordinator. He is present to respond to questions you may have that the Ministry of Health may specifically need to answer. And I need to say that there is a WhatsApp number for those of you viewing and listening and you have questions, 1-473-456-6613. That's 1-473-456-6613. Now, I would at this point invite the Honorable Nicholas Steele, Minister for Health and Social Security, to offer some brief welcome remarks. Minister Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and greetings to all who are online. And let me start by really expressing my appreciation to those of you who have worked to put this together. We have had difficult times. We are still being tried and tested in Grenada and in the world, but we remain united. We remain united on one common thread. We had different opinions, but the common thread is that we all hold Grenada near and dear. And I truly do believe that we are seeing a light in Grenada, and I hope and would like to believe that that light is the light at the end of the tunnel. Like the rest of the world, we see that the way out of this pandemic is through vaccination. And I want to thank all of you who are present, who are here to help shed light and give information and bring a certain level of comfort to any and all who may still be trying to decide or make up their mind, so that we can get to the end of the tunnel and that we can get back to a life as best as possible post-COVID. So again, thank you all for your participation and all who are on today to get information, but in particular the organizers and those who are here to shed light. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Steele. I now invite the Honorable Oliver Joseph, Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business, and CARICOM Affairs to offer some brief welcome remarks.
Good afternoon to all our listeners, or evening, wherever you are. It's a real pleasure to be part of this event. Let me first of all thank the organizers, especially Ambassador Yulan Smith, High Commissioner Keisha Grant, and Ambassador Derek James for working so hard to put this together. And to the panel, the specialists that we have on the panel, I am very pleased with the composition of the panel. It shows the concern that you have for Grenada and your willingness to contribute. I am sure with your contribution this evening, we will see an uptick in the vaccine. It is good to have other voices join in, because we as governments have over and over reached out to the population to get vaccinated. And so we think with other voices from Grenadians in the diaspora, we are convinced that this will contribute to the drive to vaccinate our population. And so I welcome this initiative, and I look forward to the information that will be shared. And let us, as Grenadians, whether we live in the diaspora or locally, really think about our country. We have come a long way. We have worked hard. We have managed to do a good job to this point, but we cannot drop our guards. And therefore, the more information we have, it is the better, because you can then make informed decision. And therefore, I welcome this initiative fully, and I wish the panel all the best.
Thank you very much, Minister Joseph. I now invite you to view a short video by Wendy McGuire, a nurse practitioner in the United States. Let's listen to the voices and the stories as we try to understand better how some people had to cope. So you would now view a short video by Wendy McGuire.
So last year, to be exact, March 8th, I worked as a registered nurse in one of the hospitals in Brooklyn. And our very first COVID patient. And so that patient came in for a fall. Patient was asymptomatic, so we did not realize she had COVID until it was too late. We moved the patient to a separate room, and we left. The patient was with 3 other patients in that room. It was a 4-bedded room, so it was a total of 4 patients in there. 1 was gone, but the other 3 was also infected with the COVID virus. During the course of the day, since everyone knew that that room was COVID, nobody wanted to go in there. So I had more exposure than anyone else. And I had this feeling that I never had before. I can't explain it. My heart rate was already 115, and I was getting sicker. The doctor took the test and he said to me, if you have any respiratory distress, then and only then you can go to the hospital. In the meantime, you have to go home. I think that same day I went on Junior George show and I told my story. And within the next 2 days, I started having respiratory distress. So I called 911 and the operator asked me, she said, how did you get COVID? And I explained to her that I was a nurse and I got it from one of my patients. Well, she was really nice. Within 10 minutes, the ambulance was outside my house waiting. It was so many, I've never seen so many sick people of my 12 years of nursing in an emergency room. And everyone was there for COVID. I was gasping, I was begging for some water, for some oxygen. Nobody gave me the oxygen. It came to a point where I felt like I was about to die and I screamed. That's when they came and they connected me to the oxygen for like 15 minutes. I started peeing on myself. So I kept coughing and I kept peeing. This time my pajamas, everything was soaking wet. By the morning time, the doctor came in and he said to me, you have COVID. And he said, both your lungs have pneumonia. And he said, we're gonna start you on antibiotics, but it's a 50-50% chance. I stayed downstairs in the emergency room for 2 days. I was waiting for a bed. It was either somebody died for me to get the bed or somebody had to go home and nobody was able to go home. So the bed I got, I'm thinking it was from a dead person, because finally when I got the bed and I went upstairs to that room, I was having nightmares every night. Dead people were sitting all over my bed. After 3 days in the hospital, the doctor came and he said to me, I'm sorry, but we have to discharge you. So I said to him, I cannot go home. I don't feel good. And he said to me, there's nothing we can do. We're gonna have to send you home. And when I got home, I got to the bottom of the steps, and we have a 3-family house, and I'm at the very top. I got to the bottom of the stairs and I was short of breath. I couldn't climb up the stairs. It's something that every time I think about, I get so emotional because I had every symptom I could think about.
We want to thank Wendy Maguire for sharing her story with us. And it really brings home the point strongly that COVID-19 is real. It affects us physically. It also affects health systems. This is a nurse on the front line. So we want to bear in mind the realities of this pandemic. Now, before I present the first panelist, I want to remind you again, for those of you just joining us, there is a WhatsApp number, 1473-456-6613. You can send your questions to that number, and when the presenter is finished, she would address the questions that you have raised. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, who will speak on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines. Dr. Molara Alexis completed her Doctor of Medicine degree at St. George's University in 2005. Her postgraduate training include a residency in internal medicine at the State University of New York in Brooklyn, and a fellowship in infectious diseases at Henry Ford Health Systems in Detroit, Michigan. Before migrating to the United States, she worked as a junior physician and later a senior doctor at the General Hospital in Grenada. She is currently a consultant physician in infectious disease at St. Bernardine Medical Center and Community Hospital in California, where she's also the chairperson of the Infection Control Department. She also works as a clerkship instructor at the Department of Internal Medicine, University of Riverside, California. Dr. Molara Alexis.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Dr. Gwinnett, for the wonderful introduction. Greetings to the Honorable Minister, Nicholas Steele, and the Honorable Oliver Joseph, and fellow panelists. Happy evening to you, Grenadians all. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share with us in this educational experience about COVID and COVID-19 vaccines. I think many of us are familiar with many of the symptoms of COVID. We know of patients who have COVID, people with no symptoms. We know of them who have mild symptoms, just like a shortness of breath, fever, weakness, body aches and pains, mild symptoms. However, as many of us may know, reminder to some of us and also maybe information to others, COVID does not only affect the respiratory system, and we mostly think a lot about this shortness of breath and lung injury, acute respiratory distress syndrome, but it really affects most of the organs of the body, or it can affect most of the organs of the body. It can cause kidney failure, renal failure. It can affect the cardiovascular system, resulting in heart failure. It can cause abnormal heart rhythms that we would call arrhythmias. It can cause inflammation of the heart and dilatation of the heart, resulting in heart failure. COVID can also, at its worst, affect the hepatic or the liver, causing liver failure. It can affect the neurological system, resulting in strokes and also causing confusion. It can affect the hematological system, resulting in clotting disorders, and something we want to just emphasize that COVID has been known to cause lots of clotting disorders, leading to strokes, to blood clots in the lungs, to blood clots in the legs, leading to limb ischemia. And also in children particularly, we have this thing that is called the multi-system inflammatory syndrome. After patients recover from COVID, children, after they recover from COVID, it appears as if their body system probably goes into a hyperacute state where they can also experience shock and shutting down of some of the organs. And this is something that has been seen in children after they recover from COVID, going into another inflammatory state. COVID can also result, severe critical COVID I'm talking about, can also result in what we call septic shock and your organs of the body shutting down. And so we just want to remind ourselves about it, that COVID is more than just a little cough or cold, which I'm sure most of us would know that already. And then lately, I'm sure we have heard in the news about the post-COVID syndrome after people have recovered from COVID, where they just can't seem to get back to normalcy, having persistent symptoms of shortness of breath or chest pain or dizziness or depression, anxiety, not being able to sleep. And so COVID really is a disease that can affect every system of the body. How is COVID transmitted? So COVID transmitted mainly by inhalation. As I talk, droplets can leave me, and they can, people who are within 3 to 6 feet around me, they can inhale these droplets or aerosols and become infected with COVID. Also, as people, you have a splash, or spray if somebody is singing or extreme exercising, these respiratory droplets can drop on the mucous membranes of the eyes or the nose or the mouth and can cause COVID-19 disease. And also by touch, if we touch a surface that's infected with this virus and then we touch our eyes, COVID can also be transmitted, or rather I should say the SARS-CoV-2 virus can be transmitted that way, causing COVID-19. And so we just want to remind ourselves of this and the importance for ensuring, especially in areas where there may not be a lot of immunity, physical distancing, use of masks, avoiding crowds, having adequate ventilation and hand hygiene. These are some of the important things. And the immune system is really what we depend on to help us with COVID. And there are some people who say, well, let's just depend on what we can do naturally. And I, as a physician, do believe that we should do our best by having a diet that is rich in plant-based food so that we can get a lot of these phytochemicals which fight inflammation. We should get enough sunshine, so we're having enough vitamin D. Vitamin D is very good in stimulating the immune system. We should be getting enough rest. We should be getting enough water. But beyond this, we need to do other things to help our immune system to fight COVID. And so the immune system has these cells, the B cells and the T cells. And the B cells produce these proteins called antibodies. You would remember when you see the picture of the SARS-CoV virus, it has these little spikes, which is the crown of the virus, so to speak. And so the antibodies prevent the spikes on the virus from entering the cell. That's what the B cells do. The T cells, you have the killer T cells, which kill infected cells that are infected with the virus. The T cells kill them. And then there are other of the T cells which stimulate the B cells to produce antibodies. And so the antibody is that God-given the immune system, is that God-given system that we have to fight infection. And we are saying there's a place for diet, there's a place for rest and water and exercise in helping the immune system. But as we continue in this short presentation, we want to recognize that there's another way to help the immune system to fight COVID-19. And so we have heard a lot about herd immunity, meaning when sufficient people in a population have had exposure to the disease, that they are able to prevent the spread of disease. And so that's where you have natural herd immunity when sufficient people have had exposure to the disease. But this can sometimes be a very detrimental situation because in the case of COVID-19, we would not want most of our population to experience it based on the symptoms. And that's where vaccination comes into place, because vaccination helps the immune system or primes the immune system to be able to respond to COVID-19. And so just very quickly, in the past, we would know of the vaccines. Some of the vaccines we would know of would be what you call killed or inactivated vaccines. For example, You have the chickenpox and measles, mumps, rubella vaccines, they are killed. And then you also have weakened viruses. The four more popular vaccines in this part of the Americas would be the mRNA vaccine produced by Pfizer Biotech and also Moderna, and also the viral vector vaccine produced by Oxford AstraZeneca and Janssen. And so I just briefly want to say, so what happens in the past, we have been given the virus, so our body actually responds to the virus and produces B cells and T cells so that when we come into contact with the disease, we are well equipped. But in the case of the mRNA, which is introduced to the vaccine, it teaches our body how to make the protein that is on the surface of the virus, so that when we come into contact with that virus, our body would have already known how to make the B cells, and the memory cells would be primed to be able to address this virus. This mRNA vaccine, it's the first of its kind, but the technology is not new, because for decades, scientists have been working on mRNA technology, also in production of vaccines, thinking about how they can produce vaccines, and also for cancer treatment. Again, viral vectors as vaccines, again, it's not entirely new. We have had viral vectors used already in Zika and influenza. And with the viral vector technology, the viral vector is a weakened form of an adenovirus. So the adenovirus is weak. It cannot produce disease in the body. It introduces the DNA into the body, and the body uses that DNA and converts it into RNA and to make the protein, the spike protein that is present on the surface of the cell. I want to assure us that both the DNA and the mRNA that is used in these vaccines does not integrate into our own DNA, and that has been a worry. But we assure you that the mRNA, it does not reach the nucleus, it is degraded outside of the nucleus. But the DNA, it does reach the nucleus, however, it is degraded and it does not reach into the person's DNA. So we have no worry to think that it will be integrated into our bodies. And so we have had several success stories, which I won't be able to speak about everyone individually because of time. But as we scan through the British Medical Journal, we hear of vaccine reducing transmission by as much as 49%. We hear of stories coming out of Israel that has been a leader in vaccination, of reduction in COVID due to immunizations. We also get stories out of the Journal of American Medicine, also referring to reduction in transmission of COVID as a result of vaccination. And then we also have a report from MMR, which is from the CDC, that talks about the effectiveness of vaccinations in first responders and other frontline workers and healthcare workers. And so these journal articles, which are reviewed, are showing us that the vaccination process is indeed working. It is indeed working. And then people ask about the variants. So how do the vaccines work in the context of variants? And here I have listed the different variants. The more popular ones would be the UK, South Africa, Brazil, and we hear a lot about this India variant. And I do admit that although these variants may affect the efficacy of the vaccine, they, in many instances, do not allow it to go to zero, no efficacy. And so different vaccines would have different reductions in their ability to protect based on the different variants. However, we do not expect that efficacy to go to zero. And we also want to remind ourselves that as vaccination process continues, we reduce the time that the virus has to produce more variants. So the sooner we get this disease under control, there is a reduction in the time that is available for more variants to be produced. And that's why vaccination is encouraged. And that's why we encourage people to go ahead and be vaccinated. We do acknowledge that their vaccinations have side effects, and the side effects start within the first 24 to 48 hours. Very simple side effects. When I say simple, I don't wish to imply that they may not be painful, but nothing to worry about mostly. like fever and chills, headaches, body pain. You may have pain and swelling at the injection site. I do want to caution, however, that there have been reports of major anaphylactic reactions, which are rare and not very common. And so we do encourage that if people are known to be allergic to any kind of injectable or anything at all, they should let their healthcare provider know so that they could be monitored. And we also remind patients that of our Grenadian friends and everyone listening really, that if you know that you're allergic to any of the ingredients in the vaccine, that is a contraindication for you not to take the vaccine. And also we remind you that if you in the past have had an immediate reaction within 4 hours of the vaccine, we would not be recommended to take the second dose. And so the obvious question that many people would want to ask just before I close is, what about other side effects apart from these mild side effects that could be more detrimental? And so we do acknowledge that recently with the Janssen vaccine coming from Johnson & Johnson, and that from the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, there have been reports of a syndrome that is called thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, meaning blood clots with low platelets. With the Janssen vaccine, based on about 7.9 million doses, there have been about, the rate of this clots is estimated to be about 2 for every million doses. For every million doses, about 2. And for women under 50, the incidence or the risk, tends to be a little higher, 7 for every million doses. That's for the Johnson vaccine. The CDC, however, after reviewing this data, have indicated that they feel that the benefits are greater than the risk, but there is a warning on this vaccine that women under 40 should be aware that they may be at higher risk for these clots. Again, with the AstraZeneca vaccine, there have been reports of blood clots with the first dose, and to my knowledge, I don't believe there have been reports with the second dose. In the European Union, that rate of the clot is thought to be about 1 clot to every 100,000 doses. The European Medical Association has deemed that the benefit of this vaccine is greater than the risk. The Vaccination Committee, in the United Kingdom, has offered advice to us, and they have said, or rather have offered advice to the United Kingdom, that consideration should be given to the prevalence of the COVID disease, trends of the disease, to estimate the benefits and risks and the comorbidities of the people, the vaccine supply, and then to determine if this vaccine should be given or another one. Again, the World Health Organization, after evaluating the evidence or the data on these blood clots, they have said, again, a benefit risk analysis should be done. We should look at the incidence or the new cases of COVID. We should look at the mortality rate and the age groups receiving it, and look at the availability of alternative vaccines, and then to decide. But generally, they conclude that the risk of these vaccines in many instances is greater than, the benefits, is greater than the risk. And just to close, again, we do want to remind us that the symptoms of this thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, that's blood clots with low platelets, it typically occurs 4 to 20 days after the vaccine. So the side effects such as like headache, weakness, just feeling fatigue occurred 1 to 2 days after the vaccine. But if like 4 to 20 days after the vaccine, we are getting headaches, shortness of breath, chest pain, leg swelling, back pain, or bruising of our skins easily, these can be symptoms of thrombosis, blood clots with low platelets. And so this is just very useful information in our talk about vaccines. We need to be honest. We are honest about the benefits, but we're also honest about the side effects. Realistically speaking, many of them, or rather the major one that most people are concerned, are very rare, extremely rare, but there is that risk. And I think in this context, in this forum, we can continue to have conversations as to how we can benefit from vaccinations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's stop sharing the screen. Thank you very much, Dr. Alexis. You can stop sharing the screen. We have enough. Thank you so much for sharing that very, very useful information with us. We have a couple questions here. The first one I think you've already answered. Will the vaccine alter my DNA? I think in the presentation you said no. Do you mind just elaborating briefly for us why the vaccine will not alter our DNA? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. So the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they are messenger RNA vaccines. The genetic material does not enter the nucleus. It's in the cytoplasm of the cell. It is used to produce the protein of the virus, and it stays there and it is broken down. It doesn't enter the nucleus where the DNA is located. So the viral vector proteins, such as AstraZeneca vaccine, and the Janssen vaccine, that genetic material, the DNA, it does enter the nucleus. But I do want to point out that it is not integrated into the person's DNA. It is broken down and doesn't integrate into it.
Okay. I have a question here. Now, the AstraZeneca vaccine is the only vaccine currently that is available in most of the Caribbean region. Tell us why we should trust the AstraZeneca. What are the benefits and some of the risks of the AstraZeneca vaccine?
All right, this is a very good question. So, the AstraZeneca has been studied in clinical trials. And in clinical trials, this is where you look to see, first of all, is the vaccine, does it produce a response in the body to be able to address COVID-19? And then it looks to see if it is safe. And so in clinical trials, it has been found that this vaccine has been effective in being able to reduce COVID and deaths and hospitalizations from COVID. So again, there were a couple, and I don't think I'll be able to go back there, but some of the articles from the British Medical Journal, when they did surveillance screening in the United Kingdom, they were seeing that the rates of transmissions and COVID infections was actually being reduced after the vaccination process with AstraZeneca, both AstraZeneca and Pfizer. So I think we have evidence that shows that it works. It does work in reducing COVID. And so the question really, is there a risk? Honestly, as I shared in the presentation, there is a risk of what you call thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, meaning that you can have blood clots with low platelets, and platelets are what help you to bruise. So there is the risk. The risk is considered to be low. The risk is considered to be low, but there is a risk. And so we just want in this conversation to be honest to say that it has been proven to reduce COVID. There is a risk of having these clots, but the risk is considered to be low. I do also want to point out that, it's conversations that people can have or continue to have, particularly with their healthcare providers, if they have certain particular worries. But generally, the benefits tends to be greater than the risk.
Okay. Someone is asking, if the vaccine was developed so quickly, does it compromise its effectiveness?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in the past, when vaccines were being developed, they were done one stage after the next. One stage had to be completed before the next one. But in the production of these COVID vaccines, a lot of the administrative paperwork, the things that were done were increased. Because COVID is a pandemic, the scientists and the people in the offices have most likely would have dropped the other research that they were doing, and everyone was concentrated on getting this COVID vaccine now. And then when you look at the literature, it tells us that the trials for the vaccines, instead of doing phase 1 and then phase 2 and then phase 3, waiting for one to be completed before another one, they were done concurrently at the same time to reduce the timing in which the information could be obtained. And we are saying that they did not cut corners in terms of safety or efficacy. What they did is they caused the trials to be overlapped, done at the same time, but there was no cutting of corners in safety or efficacy.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Alexis. We thank you for sharing with us. This has been very useful information.
And
again, we will now...
I just wanted to add, one thing I wanted to add regarding the AstraZeneca. So in this country here, some people have the same concern regarding the Janssen vaccine in terms of the clots. And, the CDC has said that under the age of 50, there is an increased risk, or there's a possibility. It's a rare event, but the risk may be higher in people under 50. In the women under 50, in the United Kingdom, there is a kind of analysis to look at younger women. And in some instances, after looking at the trend of the COVID and the risk of the person, deciding that this person may get the AstraZeneca vaccine, there have been other instances where they would defer to another based on certain factors. So I believe that the authorities in Grenada are kind of overlooking everything, to each day be analyzing the benefits, the risks, the kinds of people who are receiving the vaccine to make the best possible judgment in terms of risk-benefit analysis.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We now will view two more voices from the diaspora. Mr. Harold Paisady, a well-known media personality now based in New York, and Ms. Natifia Lewis, technology professional and adjunct professor based in the UK.
This is Harold Paisady in New York. My fellow Grenadians, I am urging you to take the COVID-19 vaccine. As we fight this dreaded disease, the science has proven that taking the vaccine substantially reduces the possibility of you being hospitalized, hooked up to a ventilator, fighting for your life. Grenada's low positive cases today is no guarantee of the same tomorrow. Let's be proactive. Get vaccinated, save lives.
Pre-COVID, I was always on the go. Post-COVID, I look forward to getting back to the same. My name is Natifia Lewis, technology professional, adjunct professor, mother of 3. I did my part in the fight against COVID-19 by becoming fully vaccinated, and I urge you to do the same. Together, let us help open back our countries in a new normal.
Thank you very much to our brother and sister in the diaspora for sharing with us. Remember, you can send your questions to 1473-456-6613. It is now my pleasure to introduce our second presenter, Dr. Roland Purcell, who would provide an overview of managing COVID-19. Dr. Roland Purcell studied medicine at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. He did his internship at the Port of Spain General Hospital in Trinidad and Tobago, after which he returned to Grenada to work as a medical officer at the General Hospital. After completing his residency training in general surgery at Interfaith Medical Center, New York, Dr. Purcell did a fellowship in vascular surgery at Texas Heart Institute and returned to Interfaith, where he is currently based. He has served in the Department of Surgery and is a critical care general and vascular surgeon. Dr. Purcell.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are clear. Just continue.
Okay, thank you. First, let me extend my profound gratitude to the organizing committee for inviting me to participate in this wonderful symposium. I also would like to extend a deep congratulations to Dr. Alexis. And I can tell from her presentation that she is just as erudite as her dad. I remember her dad from the days when I was at GBSS. So I think she's keeping up a wonderful tradition. Most of the folks in Grenada might not remember me, but I worked in Grenada during the first year of the PRG government in 1979 as a young and energetic and politically active person. But I'm grown older, and you're mellowing off when you grow old. So I've been asked to talk about the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and a message to Grenadians. The previous speaker gave a very good overview of the disease itself. So the COVID-19 pandemic has infected about 161 million people worldwide, and about 3.5 million deaths have occurred so far. And as you've been told, it's a RNA virus. And the pandemic began in Wuhan in China in December 2019. And before we realized what was happening, the Wuhan, the COVID-19 disease became a global pandemic. The symptoms of the disease you've been told, and one of the things I want you to remember is that 40% of patients and people who get COVID-19 are asymptomatic, meaning that in every population and in every country, there is 40% of people, 4 out of 6 will become infected, but they're asymptomatic. And that's what's dangerous about the disease. And I think that is what happened in many countries, and that's why the disease spreads so rapidly and so easily. The incubation period for the disease is about 2 weeks, but the average time is 5 to 7 days. As you've been told, the mode of transmission is person to person, mainly through respiratory droplet infection. Concerning the way the disease spreads, there is an epidemiologic data point that we should keep in mind, and that is something called R0. And what R0 tells us is for every infected person, how many people get infected. So typically you want to aspire or aim for an R0 that is less than 1. So when it's less than 1, it means that you're bringing the epidemic under control. Right now, the R0 in many areas of the world is greater than 2 to 3. In the 1918 pandemic, the flu pandemic, the R0 was between 1.5 and 2. So we're still higher than that 1918 pandemic, which means to say that we have a major challenge in our hands. Now, how you prevent this disease is really through a very robust public health measures. And I think Grenada has been outstanding in the implementation of an extremely robust public health measures. And so you've been told that mask wearing, social distancing, sanitizing your hands, vaccination is the key to preventing the spread of the disease. The big issue now is really something called vaccine hesitancy. As a healthcare professional, I must admit that my mind was a bit clouded about whether or not this mRNA vaccine could in fact affect my DNA, and there was a lot of chatter on the social media about that. So that, I think, spiked a lot of hesitance in many people, not understanding how the disease works, how it's infecting people, and how your body responds to it. And the vaccine, how it works to prevent you from getting COVID-19. I had a personal experience, and that was a Grenadian nurse who worked at Brookdale Hospital. Her name is Noreen Peters. She was a friend and a patient. And I remember her calling me on March 15th, 2020. Her words to me, Dr. Purcell, you're very important in the community. Please protect yourself. I responded, yes, Noreen, I will. April 15th, she came ill with COVID and was hospitalized at Brookdale Hospital. In June of 2020, she died and was buried. So in January, the Pfizer vaccine became available at my hospital, and I was one of the first 5 to get it. I must have been the 4th person to get it in the hospital. And one of the reasons why the hospital looked to me is because I'm currently the chairman of the medical executive committee. So I think getting certain people to take the vaccine builds trust in the vaccine. So when I thought about Noreen, and I reflected long and hard about Maureen, I said, I am doing this for Maureen and others like Maureen. And I took the vaccine, and I said, come what may. And I took it. So on the issue of vaccine hesitancy, I think misinformation is one of the big problems with vaccine hesitancy. Ignorance is another big issue with vaccine hesitancy. The social media platforms and the disinformation on social media platforms, and socioeconomic factors. But my advice to my comrades in Grenada would be, getting the COVID vaccine can protect you from getting sick. People of color are especially vulnerable to severe COVID-19. Getting vaccinated for COVID-19 helps others in your community. So not only do you think of yourself, but you have to think of how you can protect the community from getting the disease and containing the spread of the disease. More vaccinations for COVID-19 means a chance to return to normal. So the higher the percentage of people in Grenada get vaccinated, the quicker the country goes back to normal. Your tourist industry opens up, your trade opens up, work opens up, and you return to normal economic life. And Dr. Alexis alluded to this. And though the COVID vaccine development was fast, it did not skip steps. In other words, there was a pre-existing mRNA technology that allowed the adoption of this vaccine platform to manufacture the COVID vaccines. Not all of them use the mRNA technology, but the two are Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. Those two use the RNA platform. More vaccines for COVID-19 means a chance again for returning to normal. Diversity in the COVID vaccine testing helped assess safety and effectiveness. In other words, the way the trials were conducted, it was a wide cross-section of the population which were included in the studies. So it wasn't really that biased. So the conclusions about safety and efficacy were valid. The side effects of the COVID vaccine are temporary and do not mean that you're sick. So as you heard, most of the side effects from the COVID vaccine are like the viral syndrome: headaches, fatigue, fever, myalgia, joint pain. And rarely are the bad ones. And those are the anaphylaxis. And most of the people who get anaphylactic reaction are people who have had previous allergic reactions. So the general population is not at risk. It's that subset of patients with a history of allergy who are susceptible or at increased risk of getting anaphylaxis. And as I said, the allergies that you get from the vaccine is what I shouldn't say predictable, but we know the subset that's at inordinately high risk. So the protective measures are, for the people who are at high risk, meaning people who have previous allergies, they should take it in a supervised setting, and they should be observed for 30 minutes. For most people, though, 15 minutes is sufficient. The issue of the vaccine in people who are breastfeeding and pregnant is still a matter that's under review. And at this present moment, I do not believe that there is a CDC recommendation to vaccinate pregnant women. If you already have had COVID, getting the vaccine gives you added protection. So having COVID doesn't mean that you should not take the vaccine. All it means is that, as Dr. Alexis said and explained it to you, you're giving yourself increased protection. COVID vaccine also should be done on an expedited and expeditious basis. And the reason for that is the issue of the variant strains. As Dr. Alexis pointed out, there are several variant strains, and some of the variant strains are more difficult to contain than others. But the more you get vaccinated, is the least the chance of the virus infecting somebody, mutating with the emergence of a new strain. So that's the reason that we should be pursuing an expedited strategy for the vaccination. And finally, vaccines can't save lives unless people get vaccinated. So again, my plea to my fellow Grenadians, please get vaccinated. You're doing yourself a great service. You're doing your fellow citizens a great service. You're doing your family a great service. You're doing your workplace a great service. You're doing your country a great service. And what you're doing is that you're expediting the return to normal social and economic life on the island of Grenada. And with this, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Purcell. Very useful information again. To those of you sending in questions, if during the presentation your question has been addressed, I will not ask the question. For example, the person who is asking about if I'm pregnant or breastfeeding or planning to be pregnant, we heard Dr. Purcell said that research is still ongoing on that. There are a few questions for you, Dr. Purcell. Just briefly, the European countries put a pause on AstraZeneca, and now Denmark has gone further and banned both AstraZeneca and the J&J vaccines. Why is the Grenada government trying to push an experimental vaccine onto its people? Do you want to briefly comment on that?
Yes, I will comment on it. I think we have to look at it first from acknowledging the fact that there were problems with AstraZeneca in Europe. And there was a pause on the administration of the vaccine in Europe, precisely for the reasons mentioned by Dr. Alexis, and that had to do with the thrombosis-related thrombocytopenia. And it is believed that this comes about from the development of an antibody to platelets, and so the patients get a condition similar to what people get when they take heparin, and so it's called heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, and it's like a COVID vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia. Having said so, you cannot force a person to take what they have a reluctance to take. And so my response to that would be to acknowledge the reluctance to take that particular vaccine and make another vaccine available to the population, because you need to get past vaccine hesitance. So that's what I would say. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. There's some other questions, but we'll try to have at the end a sort of general discussion where I would bring back some of these questions. But I think this is an important one. Someone is saying, if I had COVID, doesn't that mean that I have the antibodies? If I have the antibodies, then why do I need a vaccine?
Yeah, what?
Dr. Alexis could answer that.
Yes, I want to answer that. So it is true, when you have COVID, you have some protection, but we do not know how long that protection lasts.
Yes, continue. Okay, all right. So thank you very much. We will move on now to another testimonial from Mr. Ryan Nelson Pariad, the president of the Diaspora COVID-19 Charitable Fund, and he's also president of the Grenada Houston Association.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to say... I just wanted to say that we are not sure how long the natural protection lasts. We believe it's about 6 months. As we go forward to this pandemic, we may know it is longer. So because we do not know how long natural immunity lasts, we need like an insurance policy to make sure we have something to back us up just in case. So that's why now you don't take the vaccine when you have active COVID. After you recover from the COVID, then you can take it. But we do it because we don't know how long natural protection lasts.
Okay, very good. And there's a question here that I think before we go to that clip that Dr. George Mitchell, someone is saying, are there enough doses on the island if people show up tomorrow to be vaccinated? Dr. George Mitchell?
Yes, I'm very much here. Good evening again to everyone, and it's a pleasure to be on this platform. Tomorrow, we want to encourage everyone to come down. Our team is going to be at the National Stadium. We have enough doses to vaccinate as many persons as would like, and we are encouraging every single Grenadian to come down there tomorrow. We are also offering the vaccines at our health centers. For that, though, you'll have to call to make sure that we have at least 10 persons to do that. So if you can find yourselves down, I mean, Grenada is a small place. Find yourselves down, if that is convenient for you, at the National Stadium, and we will take care of you in a very, very safe environment. So yes, we do have enough for everyone tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell. So we would now view a short clip by Mr. Ryan Nelson Pariat.
My name is Ryan Nelson Pariat. I'm the chair of the Grenadian in Action COVID-19 Charitable Fund. This fund was set up to assist Grenadians in the diaspora, especially those in New York affected by COVID-19. We have all seen the effects of COVID-19 on our friends, our families, neighbors, and especially our loved ones. I got vaccinated as soon as I was able to, and so did my family. We are encouraging Grenadians to get vaccinated. Why is it important for Grenadians in Grenada to get vaccinated? When Grenadians like myself or foreign visitors come to visit our beautiful island, we want to be able to feel safe to do so. And we are looking forward and encouraging you all to do your part and join us in the fight against COVID-19.
Okay, sorry. Thank you to Mr. Pariat. We now move on to our third presenter, Attorney Jackie McKenzie, who would speak on COVID-19 and the implications for minority populations. Jacqueline McKenzie holds degrees in law, human rights, and international relations. She's a solicitor in England and Wales and a barrister in Grenada, with several high-profile and reported cases behind her. This month, she takes up a partnership role at a leading city law firm where she would lead on Windrush, immigration, and civil rights. Her main areas of legal expertise are asylum, refugee, immigration, and actions against the state. Ms. Jackie McKenzie.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon to the Right Honourable Nicholas Steele, Minister of Health and Social Security, the Right Honourable Oliver Joseph, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and CARICOM, the Diplomatic Corps, and to you, the Chair, Dr. Wendy Grenard. Good afternoon also to viewers in Grenada and the US, and good evening to people in the UK and Europe. And greetings too to my esteemed colleagues who are the other speakers and panelists. I bow to you to your far more superior knowledge on the specifics of the subject. I've been asked to provide an overview within the context of a debate on the vaccine from the historical perspective, effects on our communities, busting the myths and misinformation, and the necessity for education. And I'm going to do so from the UK perspective and try somehow to link that as being relevant to Grenada. So the coronavirus disease of 2019 remains a highly contagious one, and the pandemic is ongoing. We don't see any end in sight. Worldwide, according to the World Health Organization, the data is that 14% of people acquiring the infection will develop severe symptoms, and 5% of those will suffer critical symptoms, meaning they'll die. So we cannot therefore relax. COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on all our lives. But sadly in the UK, we have seen that people from Black and Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds are disproportionately being affected. There is an urgent need, therefore, to better understand the factors driving this data and how we respond to it. the consequences are not just on our health, but also on our viability, as the full effects on our economy are not yet known. But what is known is that this same demographic will always suffer disproportionately during a recession. At the same time, conspiracy theories in these very same demographics are widespread as a result of some genuine concerns, some susceptibility given our histories and the availability of information that perpetuate myths within our influential spheres, including strong family members and friends, religion and faith leaders, political activists, and conspiracy advocates. And there's a real evidence of past mistreatment of Black people in scientific research, including the Tuskegee trials in the US, the story regarding Henrietta Lacks, and in the UK, we've had our own recent scandal with the outcomes for Black women in maternal care. In the UK too, the impact on Black and Asian workers has also been stark. You'll be familiar with the story of Caribbean nurses and other healthcare workers in the NHS, dating back, that's the National Health Service, dating back to the era of the Windrush. This trend has continued and been added to with a large percentage of doctors and other specialists from Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. These groups are overrepresented in social healthcare provision too, both at primary and secondary healthcare. A recent Public Health England report highlighted how 63% of healthcare workers who died from COVID-19 were from these demographics. Similarly, our communities are disproportionately overrepresented in other frontline services, such as the passenger transport industries. In fact, one of the most reported news stories involving the death of a London bus driver who died because he was denied adequate PPE from his employer is of somebody from a Grenadian family. There's much research underway, including Professor Thomas Yates at the University of Leicester, who is going to look at the increased risk of developing severe COVID-19 in minority ethnic groups, and whether this is explained by differences in underlying health status, lifestyle behaviors such as physical activity, and environmental factors, including measures of social inequality, which is a big issue here in the UK. He's also going to look, for example, whether the increased risk is explained by a higher burden of other diseases such as heart disease or diabetes, or by living in more polluted or deprived neighbourhoods. In the UK, though, we got going very, very late in response to managing COVID, and there's been much criticism of our government. There's an inquiry on the management of it about to start. But we have used a measure or a combination of measures to stop the spread. And the impact of the spread, including austere lockdowns, social distancing, working from home, and now a national vaccine program. The vaccine program is seen as very much an effective way of dealing with a manifestation which puts the country and its economy under severe lockdown and caused the deaths of 112,000 people. And some reports say over 150,000 people. And there are over 4 million cases of COVID. 69.4% of the adult population has had a first dose of the vaccine, and just over 38% has had a second dose. So the uptake is increasing. There is a minority anti-vax movement, as we have had in the past with the measles, mumps, and rubella, the MMR vaccine in 1996. And also more lately with the human papillomavirus vaccine, which started in 2008 to prevent cervical cancer and given to girls aged 12 and 13. A lot of outrage about those vaccines in pretty much the same way, but there's outrage regarding, in some quarters and a minority of quarters, regarding this vaccine. But most of those concerns have now dissipated or been proven to be totally unfounded, with take-up now being huge, particularly with HPV, the MMR slightly different, with very little side effects across the board. There are two reasons for the lessons of the UK being relevant to Grenada. Firstly, the Black Caribbean people in the UK are the same as those in Grenada. If we are disproportionately affected by COVID-19 in the UK, were Grenada to ever have a serious problem, those underlying factors, including comorbidity that you've heard of from the previous speakers, overcrowding, large households, low-paid jobs, occupations where we are unable to work from home, etc., are going to be the same or worse. Grenada must be credited for managing the pandemic in such a way that it has done. If it's not the best, it's probably has one of the, if it hasn't got the best, or it must have rather the best index in the world for performance, I would have thought. 1 death and no active cases, an extraordinarily little impact other than the impact that's likely to come on the economy. But this does not mean Grenada can afford to be complacent. We only need to look across our maritime border to Trinidad and Tobago, who just this week announced a state of emergency and is at risk of running out of hospital beds in ICU and other acute departments. COVID-19 is real, and it is not going anywhere. Just when the UK thought it could resume normality on the 21st of June 2021, there is now such a worrying trend caused by the Indian variant, putting this liberation in doubt and causing much more strategic use of vaccines in the conurbations affected. So how does what is happening in the UK impact on Grenada? The pandemic is testing our societal structures like never before. To deal with it successfully, we need to think and act collectively. We need to be led by our key institutions, be they health, science, education, and research. We must take our information from established and creditable sources and make decisions in an informed way. In the UK, vaccines are seen as one of the ways in which the pandemic will be addressed. It's not the only way, but it is an important tool in the same way it was used to eradicate smallpox and polio. The rapid development and testing of COVID-19 vaccines has been an extraordinary scientific undertaking. What happens now is arguably even more important to ensure the vaccines are an effective intervention. And to do that, people would need to consider the science and the research. There are economic consequences too. The Grenadian diaspora accounts for 4% of Grenada's GDP. This was 2019, according to the World Bank. This dropped from 10% in 1990 and has hovered around 4% since 2003, rising to 8% in 2005, which I suspect was due to families sending more money after Hurricane Ivan. And this is just direct remittances, so it does not include other expenditure, such as house building, holiday spending, etc. So whatever happens in the UK and to the UK Grenadian community is going to have an impact on Grenada. If we feel the pinch, Grenada will feel it too. Societies must deal with the issue of vaccine hesitancy. The belief that the vaccine may be unnecessary, ineffective, or unsafe, or even all three, is real. The pandemic has created the ideal conditions for mistrust of a COVID-19 vaccine to thrive. The fact that you may not catch the virus if you break social distancing guidelines, and that the illness may be mild if you get it, has led some to conclude that there is no real problem. The unprecedented speed with which the vaccines have been developed has also provoked worry. There are concerns that safety has been compromised or that the vaccine will be rolled out before we understand the extent and nature of possible side effects. Moreover, this is all taking place after a long period in which trust in science, medicine, and key institutions has been steadily eroded. But in the UK, with all of that, research shows a substantial majority in favour of a COVID-19 vaccine, with 72% willing to be vaccinated. 16% of the population aren't sure. Vaccine hesitancy has implications for us all. The fewer the people who are vaccinated, the greater the number of people who will get seriously ill. Also, we do not yet know how many people will need to be vaccinated to achieve full herd immunity, but an estimate of 80% of a population has been suggested. Some of the fetters to vaccine take-up include a lack of understanding of the potential collective benefit, how your own actions will impact on the effect on your community and on your country as a whole. It's not just about you, it's about the whole of society. The belief that we will not get COVID. We are all at risk, even in countries with low infection rates, as Grenada is currently. The effectiveness of the vaccine. It is early days, but in the UK, the figures are very low for hospitalisation of those who've had it and for side effects. Most people are actually pro-vaccine at a global level, and we all grew up relying on vaccines for their protection from disease. On this occasion, people need the evidence that quality has not been sacrificed for speed. They need data, not sound bites and PR. And we certainly don't need threats, unless, of course, the country hits a major crisis. Grenada is a country full of intelligent people. Campaigns must be intelligence-led and knowledge-based. Our economy is important, but so are we, and we must be aided to make decisions. In the UK, we have seen major vaccine hesitancy in the Black and South Asian community, mainly because of a lack of trust. But just this weekend, as the effect of the Indian variant took hold in some communities across the UK, strategic and targeted campaigns, like pretty much what we're doing here this evening, has led to a major take-up of the vaccine. Grenadians in Grenada have asked me, why is the vaccine an issue in a country with such low incidence, climatic conditions, etc.? And all I have to say to that situation is that COVID-19 remains real. The situation about how it will unfold and where it will unfold around the world remains fluid and dangerous, and we only have to look at our neighbour, Trinidad and Tobago, to see that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. You've said a lot that really had me thinking in terms of the comparison between the Black and Asian communities in the UK and the sort of social determinants of health that the majority Black people in Grenada, we share the similar kind of issues, you know, poverty and housing issues and non-communicable diseases, which really, if we have an outbreak, would put us at serious risk. So I really want to thank you for helping us to understand some of the larger issues comparatively and reminding us about what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And if in fact there is an outbreak, what will that mean? There is a question here about how has the COVID pandemic affected disparities in the healthcare system? And I think you would have touched on that, but you want to just briefly address that question for the person who sent it in?
Well, yes. Well, I mean, there is a major discussion going on in the UK at the moment about how there are major racial disparities across all healthcare indicators. I mentioned maternal healthcare being one of those, and there's a major investigation going on to that. And of course, people are saying that the disproportionate statistics for COVID-19 in the Black and minority ethnic community must have something to do with those racial disparities, but that isn't known for sure. It's an anecdote, or we think that's the case, and so there is a commission set up to look into that. We've had a report by the Commission for Race and Ethnic Disparities. Unfortunately, it's a report that none of us support because it kind of went off tangent, but it has actually addressed the issue of the fact that there are issues in our lifestyles, in our diet, in the comorbidities that were mentioned that aren't necessarily factored into the healthcare planning and policy and the delivery, both at primary and secondary levels. And so we think that there therefore has to be a direct correlation to the fact. Of course, there are environmental factors, particularly, for instance, the South Asian community have still been going to their faith places like the mosques and the temples and so on. They live in overcrowded households more than other groups and so forth. So there are environmental risks and factors, but we still think that racism is very much at the heart here.
Yes, good. Thank you very much. We'll continue this discussion at the end. I really want to thank you for your contribution. We'll move on to to continue the program, and we are on schedule. But I have a question that I would want Dr. George Mitchell to answer at the end. Jackie did mention that the fewer the people who are vaccinated, the more people will become ill. So, Dr. Mitchell, at the end, when you're giving your final remarks, if we come up with a scenario that there is an outbreak, we want to know what is the number for herd immunity in Grenada and where we are now with vaccination. So hold that question at the end. I would want you to answer that. So we'll move on with the program. We'll hear 2 testimonials now. And for those of you who wanted to send in questions again, the number is 1473-456-8888. 6613. We'll have two testimonials from one, Mr. Claude Sylvester, President of the Grenada Heritage Association, based in the UK, and Miss Nicola Shaw, a staff nurse in the UK.
Hi, my name is Claude Sylvester. I live in London. I wish to tell you about my experience with COVID. In January of this year, 4 members of my household were diagnosed positive with COVID. I suffered the worst and I was unwell for 4 weeks. In fact, I had to go to my doctor twice. I was very worried because I have lost 3 members of my family because of COVID. There is a saying in Grenada that it is better to be safe than to be sorry. And because of that, I have taken the 2 doses of the vaccine, and I feel a lot better. And I wish to encourage everyone to adopt the same mantra. It is always better to be safe than to be sorry.
Hi everybody, my name is Nicola. I am a Band 5 staff nurse in the UK. I work in the medical ambulatory unit, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about why my experiences in COVID and why I think having a vaccine might be a good idea. So I was redeployed to A&E during the first lockdown, and it was a very harrowing experience. A lot of people were dying, and as a nurse you just felt so helpless to stop it. So I was really excited for the vaccine to come around, but like everybody I was a bit reserved. I was a bit unsure about it, so I decided to do my own research and have a look, and from doing that I saw that there was much more benefits to taking the vaccine than there were risks. And since I've had both my vaccines, and I think that is very important, I want to be able to protect other people as well as myself from having COVID. I've been lucky enough not to have it as yet. But my dad, he's got diabetes and COPD, so I want to be able to protect the people around me, and that is also why we should all consider and do our own research about this COVID vaccine.
Yes, I wish to again thank Claude Sylvester and Nicola Shaw. It is very important, not just for us, but to protect the ones that we love, the ones around us. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Reverend Terence Griffith, who is a senior pastor of the oldest African-American Baptist Church in Philadelphia, the historic 211-year-old First African Baptist Church of Philadelphia. He's a former senator in the Parliament of Grenada and the author of 8 published books, including Galatians, A Prescription for Liberty. Reverend Griffith will share with us his perspectives on the clergy's role in vaccine uptake. Reverend Griffith.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, Honorable Minister Steele and Joseph, Your Excellency Yolan Smith, and other members of the Diplomatic Corps, fellow panelists, listening audience. Last March, I was returning from Sierra Leone, and on landing at JFK, I noticed that many people of Asian descent who had disembarked from another airline were wearing masks. We were by then in the eye of a pandemic and were unaware of the challenging times that were ahead of us. In fact, for those of us who are in pastoral ministry, and for those like myself who lead global missional work, the thought never crossed our minds that planes would be grounded, borders closed, and churches shuttered. We had never faced such situations before, and the majority in the religious community were ill-prepared to deal with this contagion. First, the church was in a self-righteous mode, that God had poured out his wrath on mankind for its sins. And C-19 was just another plague from the throne room of heaven. Second, many in the religious community espouse that this plague would not impact those who believe. We were somehow immune, and then church members began dying, and pastors also. In fact, the Kojic denomination lost more than 12 of its bishops from one mass gathering in April 2020. It certainly came home to me when one of my very good colleagues, Dr. Michael Johnson, fine preacher from Pensacola, Florida, only 57 years old, contracted C-19 and he died. Third, we have preached so many conspiracy theories, and to be quite candid, all may not be far-fetched. And the Black church as we know it may have good reason to be suspicious of the government and scientists vis-a-vis the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. But too many people are still dying for us to be locked into myopic views and ideas. I believe that while the scientists and physicians debate and try to explain the origin of the pandemic and its remedy, there is still an urgent need for a theological and pastoral guidance for Christians globally. While I believe that ultimately there will be divine judgment at the end of the age, I do not subscribe to the view that C-19 is a divine punishment to end the world and or a tool of the Antichrist to suppress Christianity. Although C-19 is a major crisis, there have been others like the Spanish flu, Black Death, swine flu, and others. Therefore, like other pandemics that the world has experienced, the approach to the present crisis should involve calling upon God as Christians and taking responsible actions as responsible citizens. As a pastor and as a community leader, this pandemic has put a tremendous strain on families and the community. Incontrovertibly, families are divided, particularly when the views of one spouse are polar opposite to the other, and the children find themselves smack dab in the middle. Notwithstanding that parents have adult children living with them who question the veracity of this pandemic and also the vaccinations that are being given. And so the question really is to be or not to be vaccinated. And I believe that while being vaccinated is a personal preference, one has to ask whether the refusal is good social responsibility. The question, how can the religious community help in the fight against C-19? Already where I live, churches, including the church where I pastor, have been testing sites. And in fact, a lot of churches in the Philadelphia area are now vaccination sites, including my church. As a result of this pandemic and future coming contagions, I believe that it is incumbent on the religious community to tap into health professionals in their congregations, promoting holistic and healthy living. There is no doubt that healthy people have a better chance of surviving C-19 than those who have underlying health conditions. Again, in making a decision to be vaccinated or not, one must ask whether the risks are greater than the benefits. And once you have honestly answered this question, you decide to be or not to be. And then if you decide not to be vaccinated, the question you must answer is, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my sister's keeper by not being vaccinated? I have one word of caution, though, in closing. I believe that governments here in the United States and in the Caribbean or anywhere must not use pandemics to impose its will on the religious community in the name of the general good. But I believe that governments must work collaboratively with the religious community to educate and lead its people. And then we may find that people are more receptive to be vaccinated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reverend. We have two short questions for you, but my takeaway from your presentation, you say taking the vaccine is personal preference.
Yes.
But the refusal, good social responsibility. I think that's a very important question, the whole notion of, am I my brother or my sister's keeper? We have two questions here. The first, let me just put it up here. What should be the role of a religious leader with regards to healthcare and promoting vaccination? And I'll give you the second one right away. How can we deal with restrictions on mass gatherings as a church or as religious?
You broke up a little bit there, Wendy.
Oh, okay, let me take it again. What should be the role of religious leaders with regards to healthcare and promoting the vaccine? And how can religious organizations deal with restrictions on mass gatherings?
Well, first of all, I think that, the religious leaders and the church ought to practice what we call holistic ministry. We have a lot of unhealthy people in our churches. And so I think as much as possible, churches should set up what we may call health ministries to educate our people on best practices so that, they don't become ill, exercising, all these type of stuff the church needs to promote. In terms of the mass gathering, I think government should stay out of the church's business, period. Right. And that's why I talk about collaboration between the church and the government. If you allow the government to put its head like an elephant would put its head in a tent, then ultimately the entire body would get in. And so I say government ought to stay out. Now, at the same time, religious leaders ought to be responsible. Now, when the COVID came down, I need to speak for myself. We never closed the doors of a church, but we restricted people from coming. We had great streaming. I've been doing streaming for my church since, 2016. And so we were well prepared when this came about. And then we slowly started allowing people to come in. Our governor in Pennsylvania said that religious services, that's what's the term you use in the medical field? Essential service. It's an essential service. And so he never shut down the churches. Our mayor decided he wanted to shut down the churches, but he had to be very careful because folks would have taken him to court. We as preachers, we as leaders need to be responsible and not put people in harm's way. But the government must never legislate to the religious community what should be done.
Okay, thank you very much, Reverend, and we appreciate your comments. Before we move to the final testimonial and the final, the penultimate testimonial and the final presentation, I just want to throw out a question for the end. Would anyone know what percentage of the UK population received the AstraZeneca so far? So either Jackie or any one of the doctors on the panel, if you know that, so at the end, you could inform us of that. At this point, we have Dr. Wanda Peters, who is a doctor based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We would view her testimonial at this time.
Greetings, my brothers and sisters from Grenada. My name is Dr. Wanda Peters. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm coming to you today just with a strong encouragement to consider getting your COVID-19 vaccine. We know that many people have died from it and have had severe illness, and most of them have recovered. But we're discovering more and more that there's a subset of people who are long haulers, people who have long-term complications from this virus that can include neurological problems as well as psychiatric issues like paranoia and hallucinating, as well as depression. And the depression can become so severe that there's suicidality associated with it. I so look forward to the day that I can come down to Grenada to have a good time with everybody again. We're all in this together. The sooner that the majority of us can get vaccinated, the sooner we can protect ourselves and each other and return to some level of a normal life. So please, please, I beg you, go out and get the shot. You'll be glad you did. Take care.
muted. Thank you very much for that testimonial, and we appreciate all our sisters and brothers in the diaspora who have been sharing with us. We have a final presentation, but I just wanted to mention, and we can speak about this at the end. I would want to hear the medical practitioners and professionals in the field. There's an article that came out on Health Day News. Coronavirus lingers in the penis and could cause impotence. I don't know if that is true, and someone is asking a question about that. So at the end, if someone would please answer, the men would want to know if that is indeed the case. And I'm sure Dr. Mitchell will have long lines tomorrow for the vaccine if that is indeed the case. Coronavirus lingers in the penis and could cause impotence, from Health Day News. Okay, we have now our final presenter, Dr. Leslie Ann Williams, who is a board-certified internist. She's a philanthropist and multi-talented artist based in Virginia. She has forged a path for herself in the worlds of both medicine and art. As a physician, Dr. Williams is founder and CEO of Healing Wings International, a primary care practice that addressed health disparities in the U.S. Virgin Islands and surrounding territories. She was also a founding member of the Caribbean chapter of the American College of Physicians. Dr. Williams will discuss her ICU experience with COVID-19 patients. Dr. Williams.
Hello, thank you so much, Dr. Grenade, and to all the distinguished guests and panelists. Thank you so much for having me and welcoming me to your platform. As stated, I am an internist and I'm also a pediatrician, and interestingly enough, to the Reverend on the panel, I have had many discussions with church organizations as such as it relates to COVID-19. I am not going to be before you long because I think much has been said. And Dr. Alexis, thank you so much for your comprehensive presentation. And just so you know, I was in your background, in your backyard there at Henry Ford. I was at Wayne State University Medical School. But where we are today compared to where we were last year is vastly different and yet the same. We were at a point where our hems were laden and our hospitals were just at a dire strait, if you will. We were without beds, we were without PPE, and I became part of an organization. We formed an organization where we literally gathered money and purchased PPE to send to physicians and residents, because we had residents who were dying of COVID and several other physicians who have lost their lives in this battle with this enemy that we cannot see with the naked eye. So today, there has been a definite change in our PPE availability, and that's vastly different. And I think a lot of the nurses and physicians on the panel can attest to many of the doctors were infected because we just didn't have the proper equipment. We in the Virgin Islands, we were scrambling to ensure that we had ventilators so that we would be prepared. And thankfully, we never had quite a surge to deplete our supply, if you will. Hospital capacity, I know that there are still some places here in the US where there is a surge. The hospital stays busy, and especially in some of the rural areas where I've had to go on assignment, the hospitals have been brimming at the seams. But the one thing I want people to understand, it is not simply COVID. While COVID is still happening, and it is happening, and people are still dying of COVID-19, we're still getting admissions into the ICU, we're still having to intubate and put patients on ventilators. Other issues turn up. Heart disease is still happening. Decompensation of mental illness is still happening. Alcoholism is still happening. Diabetes and DKA is still happening. All of the other things that people came to the hospital for is still happening. And then you compound that with the COVID cases. I am here to implore those of you who are in our communities who are suspicious of medicine. I understand, okay, as a doctor, and I wasn't a doctor all of my life. I grew up with a grandmother who gave me herbs, and we used boiled bush and put the bush in, this bush is good for that and that bush is good for this. So we understand that there are natural remedies to things. This is a different enemy, if you will. And getting the vaccine does not mean that you cannot take all of your, do all of the other things to stay healthy. So yes, we want you to exercise. Yes, we want you to make sure that you boost your immune system. Yes, we want you to get adequate sleep and all of the other things that was mentioned prior by my colleague. But we also want you to get the vaccine. And I understand that as a layperson, it is difficult to understand how immunology works. Listen, as a doctor, I have to remind myself how immunology works. I have to go through my notes and review my medical school notes to understand the T helper cells and the memory cells and the B cells and the MHCs and the MHC 1s and 2s. There's a lot out there to learn. But one of the things that I want you to understand is much research has gone into these vaccines. The Moderna, Pfizer, I got the Moderna 2 doses. I'm fully vaccinated. The AstraZeneca and the J&J. Much has gone into these vaccines. And they are, it's amazing that what we have accomplished. And if you are a person of faith, then you cannot deny that this is a miracle. And God works in so many different ways, and miracles occur in so many different ways. And this morning I was on a panel where we talked about taking God outside of the box and recognizing that God can do miracles through medicine as well. And so I implore you to, and even I know that we're doing the AstraZeneca in our region, the efficacy against severe disease is 70%. And I know that they did 2 arms, one in Brazil and one in the UK. And in the UK, an interesting thing happened where there was a half dose on day 0 and a full dose on day 28. And they had 90% efficacy against severe disease compared to 62 for the Brazil arm. These are great numbers. Regardless, these are great numbers. And, I understand the hesitancy. But prevention is so much better than cure. I lost a very good friend to COVID-19. Healthy people are dying too, or what we consider to be healthy people. Children are affected. Children have died and are dying from COVID-19. So this is not, we're not here to do harm. I made an oath to first do no harm. And so I feel obligated that I remind you that vaccines have been around for a long time, and vaccines have stamped out some diseases that brought comorbidities. If we look at polio, the polio vaccine, look at the miracle of the polio vaccine, And so I just wanted to say, and one of my colleagues made a point, and I know there was some concern about the J&J vaccine and the clot. And when you look in terms of the numbers, that was 6 cases in 6.8 million people. You are more likely to get a clot from cigarette smoking. That's 1,763 cases in 1 million. You're more likely to get a clot from oral contraceptive pills. That is 50 to 1,200 cases in 1 million. You're more likely to get a clot from actual COVID-19. 16.5% chance. You're more likely to get a clot from COVID-19 than from the J&J vaccine. So it's all about perspective. And I'm going to say this, and I understand the hesitancy, but trust the science. We have seen there have been too many deaths that have happened. And it's sad because many times those who are in the ICU, they can't have any visitors. People are dying alone. And people who thought they would never get COVID. But COVID is not, SARS-CoV virus is not a respecter of persons. It does not respect who you are, whether you have a title or no title, male, female, young, old, rich or poor. Disproportionately more poor people have contracted. But COVID is no respecter of persons. And so give yourself a fighting chance and get vaccinated. This is Dr. Leslie. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. You know, after every presenter, I just want to say, wow, what an interesting program, educational. I have taken away a lot from this. We have a number of 5 questions here for Dr. Williams, but I want to throw out, because we will have a general session after where we would have a discussion, and we welcome more questions in. Again, the number for all of you, 1-473-456-6613. I want to throw out a scenario. Well, after we've dealt with these questions, I want to come back to that scenario. Let's fast forward 6 months into 2021. The pandemic is still raging. We do not yet have synchronized herd immunity globally. What is the best case scenario for Grenada? And what may be the worst case scenario? If we stay on the course that we're at now, what could happen 6 months down the road? That would be the best case. What would be the worst case? So I want us to discuss that after we address the questions that have come in here. So, Dr. Williams, and you mentioned the medical fraternity. This question asks, is the medical fraternity satisfied that all the vaccines currently in use, especially the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, are safe? I know we've dealt with some of that, but speak to medical practitioners and members of the medical fraternity in Grenada who may have some doubt. Speak to your comrades in Grenada.
I think overall, in the discussions that I have had with colleagues across the globe, and I really do mean across the globe, we are saying yes to the vaccines. We actually, when the CDC pulled J&J, there are many of us who were like, why? The numbers were so low and the risk was so low, it didn't make sense. But we understood their push to be transparent. So if there was, something came up, in order to win the trust of the public, it's best to be transparent. So we understood that. But I think overall, resoundingly, we are saying these vaccines are safe. And many of my colleagues have gotten the different ones. As I stated before, I got Moderna. My mom got Moderna. Some others have gotten Pfizer, and my UK colleagues have gotten AstraZeneca. So we are spread out across the globe. And I think when you look, and I wrote some numbers down here, some I have off the top of my head, but the efficacy for Moderna against severe disease is 100%. Where do you get that? 100% efficacy against severe disease, 94.5% effective against just disease in general. Pfizer is 87.5%. AstraZeneca, like I stated, is 70%. So these numbers are good numbers for a vaccine. And so for my colleagues, physicians, who are still questioning the safety, I say go to the science. Look at the science. Be convinced and assured that none of the particles are being incorporated into the DNA. That is not how the science works. And I know with AstraZeneca, they use a DNA virus and it releases the DNA to the cytoplasm, which then goes into the nucleus, but it does not incorporate into your DNA. It simply creates a protein, if you will. So it kind of takes a picture, snap, woohoo, and then we replicate. But I want my colleagues, my physicians who are not convinced of the science to perhaps reach out to me, and I will connect you to others, and let's have a dialogue. Because as physicians, as leaders in the community, we have a grave responsibility. And I would say that responsibility is with pastors as well. Anyone who has influence over the community has a responsibility to be informed, and be informed with the right information. Because if you set a foundation on the wrong information, and I'm about to preach here, if you set a foundation on the wrong information, you will come to a wrong conclusion. And same with doctrine. If your doctrine is faulty, your conclusion will be faulty. And so I encourage delving into the science and getting the information from credible sources. Because Dr. Leslie.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think an outcome from this session could be a follow-up where Dr. Williams and members from the Grenada Medical Practitioners Association, if that's what it's called, could have a follow-up webinar, just a wrap session, a discussion, if they choose to. And pastors and other religious leaders could connect with Reverend Terence as well, Griffith, and have we need to talk. We need to talk through this so that we can get all the information we need.
Yeah,
we have some very interesting, yes?
So I just wanted to add, I know Dr. Williams mentioned the numbers, and some people have the habit of comparing the numbers to say, I'll take this vaccine because it has the higher number, and maybe I don't want this one, AstraZeneca, which because it's lower. But we have to remember we can't compare numbers with numbers, because in order to do that, you have to study the vaccines under the same conditions. It's like trying to get somebody to run up Granny Tang and another person on Granans at the same time, because Granny Tang is more hilly. So because the vaccines weren't studied under the same conditions, we can't compare numbers. So even though that AstraZeneca number is a bit lower, or another number, Janssen, may be a bit lower, it's their effective vaccines, and we just want to reiterate that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Alexis. Now I'm throwing this question out. Any one of you can answer. If the vaccine does not prevent someone from catching COVID-19, then why should I take it?
Yes. Great question. So it is true that there's no vaccine that is 100% effective. There are breakthrough vaccines, but the studies showed that even though you do get it, the severity would be less. The rate of hospitalization and death would be less. So you get it because you want to reduce the rate of hospitalization and death. I may also get it and I may be asymptomatic, but if I'm in contact with someone, an older person who has heart failure, lung disease, I put them at risk. So I do it to protect myself, even though I'm asymptomatic and so forth. And also, even though I do get it, it may not be as severe as if I didn't get the vaccine.
I concur. That is exactly it.
Okay, another question here, and I'll merge two questions actually. Who should not take the vaccine? For example, I know someone with a pacemaker. Should that person take the vaccine or not? They're asking here, should someone with sickle cell, if a sickle cell patient has tick, what is the likelihood of a sickle cell patient getting blood clots from AstraZeneca and the likelihood of getting a I can't pronounce the word crisis.
Vaso-occlusive crisis, right. Yes.
Who should not take the vaccine? And we have AstraZeneca at the moment. Who should not take this vaccine?
Yeah. Anyone who is allergic to any of the components of the vaccine. Sorry, go ahead. Or if you're allergic to any of the components of the vaccine, you do not take the vaccine. If you've had the first dose and you have an immediate reaction like shortness of breath, and so within 4 hours, it's recommended not to take the second dose of that vaccine. Now, the people that you mentioned, sickle cell and people with pacemakers, these are people who are at higher risk for severe disease. So people who have like diabetes, COPD, sickle cell disease, and these different asthma and so forth, these are the people who are at higher risk and probably should be the first ones to be in line to take a vaccine. Obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, lung disease, sickle cell disease, these should be at higher risk. I do want to mention that in some of the studies, so people with autoimmune conditions, it's not known how effective it would be in these people, but that again is not a contraindication. With all things being level, that's not a contraindication for taking the vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
And then I would also add for persons, please be sure that you do have a primary care physician and that you are consulting with your primary care physician. Medical advice on social media is not appropriate, right? So please do get into a therapeutic relationship with a primary care doctor and be sure that they are guiding you all along the way.
Okay, another question. Thank you. If one is on treatment with steroid drugs, should I hold off on taking the vaccine until treatment is done?
So, people who are on immunosuppressant medications, the recommendation is, I probably can't answer it generally, but in certain conditions where you're on drugs which lower your immunity, it's sometimes said that you should kind of time it away from receiving the dose. But with steroids, it may not be the case. It depends on how much steroids you're on, what you're on it for. So I don't want to just broadly answer it. But normally, like if you're on medications for maybe lupus or other immunosuppressant conditions, the recommendation is if it is practical, to take that medication away from the dose of the vaccine, that's best. But that cannot always happen. So again, everyone must have this conversation with their primary care doctor.
Okay, good. So just for a time check, I'm letting the audience know that we are now in the open session. So we have these questions and any one of you can jump in, Dr. George Mitchell as well. And remember, we have to discuss the possibility of the best case and the worst case scenario, and what is the number for herd immunity for Grenada and where are we now? But there's another question here, two questions in fact, that deal with minors. One says, thank you for this presentation. Please clarify the following. My 13-year-old son will be fully vaccinated when we visit this July. Will this vaccination be considered? Everyone in my party will be fully vaccinated. What COVID-19 tests will we need to have before arrival? We are going to Karakou. And just following up on that, are minors traveling to Grenada expected to take a PCR test? If they're not being tested, what is the point of making them extend quarantine for vaccinated travelers at the end of 7 days? If you still have no idea of their COVID status. Dr. George Mitchell, those are for you.
Wendy, thank you, Dr. Grenade, sorry.
Okay.
Listen, I feel so elated. All our Grenadians out there in the diaspora, excellent, powerful presentations. I really hope that our population was listening. So convincing. Thank you guys so much. To delve into some of the protocol questions, our current protocol speaks to persons being vaccinated, fully vaccinated. If you are in a party and you're fully vaccinated, then you only spend anywhere up to 48 hours in quarantine. You have to come in, of course, with a PCR negative test, and you're tested on arrival. I mean, I am aware that there are different schools of thoughts of how we should do this, but guys, this is the way we have apply the science, and our results have been good. It is not perfect, and so far we continue to listen, and we continue to modify our responses depending on our science and our capacity to deal with an upsurge or breakout of cases here. I would like to go to the suggestion or the article that came out regarding penile or impotence. I know Dr. Purser.
Speak on it.
I know Dr. Purser is probably more versed in that than me, but I was in the barbershop this morning, and that is a concern. My instinctive reaction to that is maybe where there is smoke, there is fire, and as such, I would strongly advise all my colleagues, all my male friends to ensure that that you get vaccinated, because you never can tell. We don't know everything about the complications of COVID-19 virus. And there was another question about herd immunity in Grenada. Based on our population size, we are aiming to have about 68,000 persons vaccinated. We are just over the 15,000 mark, so we do have a long way to go. This session would, undoubtedly help in convincing folks that they need to. They debunking a lot of some of the theories out there. So we really look forward to an increased uptake in the vaccine in the next few days. So I want to encourage, I know we are running maybe just over time, but I want to encourage folks to come out tomorrow. Our vaccination centers are open, particularly the center at the National Stadium, and we expect record turnout again. We have been having an upswing in the turnout since late last week. I vaccinated some folks in my office yesterday, and as such, I think people are coming to the realization that yes, we do need to take this vaccine so that we can return to our lives as quickly as possible in a normal way. So I hope that I've addressed some of the the key issues here. And I know we're running out of time. Back to you, Wendy.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell. I know we're running out of time. We have a lot more questions, and Grenadians, we are sorry if we can't get to all the questions, but I really want us to do some kind of scenario mapping, just quickly.
Dr. Burnett,
yes?
So just before you do that, I know you had asked about the number of AstraZeneca vaccines in the given.
Yes, okay.
So as of April 14, I have some documentation, 21.2 million doses given. And with that, the rate of the clots was 7.9 to a million. So again, it's not a whole lot. And we just want to again remind people that clotting with COVID, the clotting, we understand, we're not rushing by this concern, but again, the clotting that occurs with COVID, whether it's a stroke, whether it's a blood clot in the lungs, the leg, it's more than with the AstraZeneca. So we just want to remind people to put that in perspective, but we do understand the concern and what's being voiced.
Yes, yes. Someone is also asking about if we know how many deaths from the vaccines to date. Do we know?
For the Johnson vaccine, when they had given 8.7 million doses, there were 28 cases of the clots with 3 fatalities. So that was the Johnson. In terms of the AstraZeneca, I'm sorry, I don't have the mortality ahead of me right here.
Okay, thank you. We will extend for another 10, 15 minutes or so because there are some important questions. And I think, Jackie, I could address this question to you as the lawyer on the panel. Someone is saying International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights, Article 7, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruelty, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. In particular, no one shall be subjected without his or her free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. The person is asking, there's a long background, but in relation to the article, why is the government encouraging the private enterprise to make it mandatory for the workers to take the vaccine? And if they don't, that they are not allowed to work. This seems to be against international law, which is illegal. I don't know, first of all, what the facts are. Jackie, would you want Dr. Mitchell to give us the facts, or do you want to lend your legal? And I also want to say from an international relations perspective, governments sign treaties, but businesses are not, you can't hold a business you can't consider a business as violated your constitutional right, because when we think about constitutional rights, we think about the citizen and the state. But at the same time, it's a valid concern. We need to know, we're speaking about the health implications of COVID-19, the economic implications, but there are some legal implications as well. And people are indeed concerned about whether their rights are being violated if businesses say that they have to be vaccinated. And if I may say, I remember being a student at the University of Miami, and every year I had to take the flu shot, and it was mandatory. I had to take chest X-rays and so forth, as I couldn't go into the classrooms. But there's a question of rights here, and we want to be able to understand rights. So, Dr. Mitchell, could you tell us what the facts are in terms of the state and firms and businesses in Grenada? And Jackie, then could you explain to us what may be some of the implications from a legal point of view?
Thank you, Wendy. This is probably the most intellectual discussions that are taking place regarding COVID-19 and vaccination throughout the world right now. I think it's a intellectual exercise that intellectuals are engaged in. I would just like to state my personal views on that. I mean, we all have rights. I have a right to protect myself as well, and so does everyone else. And so your right must not infringe on my rights, on a very personal level. But coming to what the government is saying, if I interpret right, what I'm hearing is that the government is, actively encouraging and would like to, as much as possible, persuade persons to take the vaccine. I have not heard or seen any legislation that has gone in that direction to legislate people or mandate people to take the vaccine. But there is persuasion and there is merit in the states, if you ask me, responsibility to protect its citizens. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm too old to probably convert myself into one right now, but that is, some serious conversations that needs to be had. I just want to reiterate that I think what I'm hearing from the government is that there are serious initiatives to persuade persons to take the vaccine because the government is thinking that is the right way to protect its people and to make life as normal as possible. Life is not about just going to work. There is a lot of other areas of endeavors, going to church, socializing in your homes, and all these things. And how do you best protect yourself? Apart from wearing a mask, social distancing, what the science is saying is that vaccination aids in that. So, responsible states are actually thinking more and more of going in that direction. But I don't know that the government of Grenada has taken a decision to mandate that persons get vaccinated.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Mitchell. While Jackie answers the question about human rights, I will come back to you, Dr. Mitchell, because there's a question. Are there plans to introduce other vaccines in Grenada apart from AstraZeneca? Hold that question. I'll come back to you, Jackie. Violation of rights.
Yeah, I'm probably not the right sort of lawyer to answer it because I think it... Sorry, am I speaking? Oh, sorry, I thought a message popped up saying I was muted, but I'm not. I think that there are issues to do with the Grenada Constitution that need to be discussed, as well as what treaties is Grenada a signatory to. So the person who asked the question referred to a particular protocol, and it's not clear whether he didn't say or she didn't say whether Grenada is a signatory to that piece of protocol. So it may all be irrelevant. But of course, I tried to get into Nigeria a few years ago, and because I hadn't taken my vaccine in the right time, when I got to the airport, there were all sorts of problems. So we're used to being required to take vaccines for all manner of things. You yourself spoke about needing to do so for university in the States. There may well become a time when, if we don't reach herd immunity, and if we end up in crisis, that governments may well have to do or take mandatory action. And I know particularly this question has been looked at in human rights circles in the UK. The European Court of Human Rights has also looked at it and said that they think that it is very possible to do. I think lawyers will have to examine this further. I think, though, for now, what we really want to do is what we're doing in this forum is to communicate the information, not have people going to Facebook and then their friend up the road or the man in the rum shop. We really have to communicate intelligent information to people and incentivize people. I was concerned when I saw that particular groups of workers would have to take the vaccine, particularly when we have low incidence, but I suppose that's pretty much predicated on opening up the country and enabling tourism to flourish again. So very, very, very understandable, therefore. But really, it's about educating people, because at the end of the day, even if you can use your constitution to say to people, we are going to mandate this, how are you physically going to do it unless you grab people off the street and put a needle in their arm? So we don't want to go down that road. It's about communicating and possibly incentivizing people. And the way to incentivize people is by these sorts of forums and letting people have information. Because even when I speak to relatives and friends in Grenada, I had somebody, highly intelligent, sophisticated person, just this weekend send me a video of the fact that magnets are adhering to people's arms. And that's the sort of thing that's out there. So we've got to combat that. And that's our first job.
Yes, thank you very much.
Dr. Grenade.
May I say one thing before I run off?
Dr. Grenade, I just wanted to chime in on this, and then I'll have to jump off. Because I think whereas, your rights end where mine begin, there's certain religious communities, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're long-standing, they don't take blood transfusion, they don't believe in these things. And I think it's a fine line we actually walking. And unless it really impacts the total population, I think governments will be really treading on really fine lines. And look, in the United States here, folks would keep them in court constantly. But I believe these things need to be taken into consideration, that you have religious bodies that do not believe in vaccination. And so the question is, how do you reconcile with religious bodies that, don't believe in these things? Look, I've had my trepidation. I take vaccines all the time. I go to Africa on behalf of National Baptist, and so that was easy for me, even though I had trepidation, saying, look, I take vaccines for this and that every time I travel to Africa. And so this will not harm me. It will more than likely help me. But you have other people historically and other church bodies historically, they have not done it. They don't believe in it. They don't get their kids vaccinated. And the question is, should the government be knocking on doors, pulling people out and vaccinating them? And I hope we don't get to that point globally where that has to happen, because it'll be chaotic.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Can I add one thing, please? And then I do have
Dr.
to jump
Williams.
off.
Yes.
I think when it comes to a matter of public health, that public health trumps the individual in a sense, right? When did we become a society of just me and me alone? My one and me alone. I know, and I'm going to talk for the Grenadian community. I know Grenadians to be a community-minded people. That's where I learned community. I learned community in Grenada with my Grenadian grandmother and my mother. So this whole notion that even religious organizations in the US that are privy to tax breaks will now say that the government needs to stay out of their business, then we need to question their tax exemption status. So there's a lot of things, a lot of arguments to go back and forth, but hopefully we will be more community minded and live as Christ would have us live and prefer our brother above ourselves in that regard.
Yes. And he did ask, when asked, who's my neighbor? Jesus gave us the story of the Good Samaritan. And I think lesson from the Good Samaritan is what the Reverend said earlier, let's be our brother's keeper. Yes. But I want to suggest that business places can have education sessions. I know of a particular company that had, members from Health to visit the company, and they went around and had very good information sessions. So I think communication becomes important because we are in fact a community. Yes, I want to go back to Dr. Mitchell to answer the question: are we expecting other vaccines, and what is happening with the Cuban vaccine? Many people are saying we're waiting on sovereignty, the Cuban vaccine. What's happening with that? Are we having options? I know it's a scramble out there in terms of supply chain problems and the vaccine nationalism that is happening. The powerful countries are buying up vaccines, and developing countries are finding it very difficult. Are we expecting any other type of vaccine?
So Wendy, I reached out to the powers that be regarding our ability to get vaccines. It is not that easy, as you alluded to. If we could have gotten 5,000 Moderna, 10,000 Pfizer, J&J and Sputnik and the Cuban vaccine, we probably have those here already. It is not that simple to get. Yes, the government is trying to source, small doses of those, but there is a big war out there to get these vaccines. And, in discussions that I've held, the experts are saying, and even, CDC and so forth, the best vaccine is the one that you have access to because it provides you with a certain amount of protection until you can get what you want. And there's this old saying that, let's do what we can do until we can live in that big house or get the big yacht or get the big expensive car that we want to. In the meantime, that is where we are. We are going to make all the histrionics that we can to get other vaccines. But there is a bigger picture. There are a lot of persons who are hesitant, and no matter what vaccine you come with, even you come with one that says it's made in hell or heaven, some people are so hesitant that they would not take it. I just wanted to go back because I know there are folks out there who are asking questions and have been summoned in certain circles in terms of what is going to happen in Grenada. And I just wanted to say it here regarding vaccination and activities that are going to, come about in the next few months. There's a lot of talk in different circles about having vaccination activities. In other words, if you're fully vaccinated, you can attend those activities, whether they are full church activities, where they are full, cricket in the stadium or football in the stadium activities, or some sort of like activity entertainment-wise. That is a conversation that is happening. So, I want to implore on persons that if those things are going to be normal, if we're going to get back to that kind of, social situation and economic situation, the onus is going to be on us to get vaccinated and get vaccinated as soon as we possibly can.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Mitchell. I have a question for Dr. Purcell, but I just wanted to make a comment to tie in what you were saying. Because some people say, you know what, I can wait. And when people said to me, I can wait, I said, it's really a war between the virus and the vaccine. And my younger sister, Dr. Carrie Grenade, wrote recently, she said, if you're in the stadium and you're watching a race between the three V's, the virus, its variants, and the vaccine, who would you be cheering for and who will win? And I don't think we have time to wait if in fact, more variants are being, that it's mutating into other variants, and what can happen if there's a worst case scenario that we would come to. But I have a question for Dr. Purcell. Dr. Purcell, what do the doctors think about using ivermectin or hydrochloroquine to treat COVID? We have alternatives, do we?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so let me say, the issue of hydrochloroquine, although used, there is no compelling and persuasive scientific evidence that it has any efficacy in modifying or modulating the outcome of the COVID virus infection. Now, on the question of ivermectin, I have seen some studies coming out of South America and some other places where it has been used. But again, the issue really is, what persuasive scientific data do you have to say, yes, it works or it doesn't work? I mean, the problem with using those things, I mean, ivermectin we use to treat strongyloidiasis and other infestations, and it's a fairly well-tolerated drug. And similarly, hydroxychloroquine is used in malaria. It's also used to treat people with some of the autoimmune diseases. And again, it's fairly well tolerated, but it has side effects. And so the question is, if you're using it for not a good and strong indication, why should you take that chance when there is other better tolerated therapeutics like the use of remdesivir, the monoclonal antibodies, dexamethasone, and the others? I wanted just to go back a bit on the issue of this discussion between personal liberty and public safety. The intersection of public safety and personal liberty is a hotly debated issue. And I don't think that where coronavirus is concerned, that we should try to resolve the issue in that legal space, because it will be very difficult. One cannot resort to a strategy of coercion or enforcement or legislation to get maximum cooperation. I think the battle has to take place, for want of a better word, a propaganda offensive against ignorance, disinformation, social media platforms, the socio-economic factors that impede a comprehensive vaccination program. But in the circumstance of Grenada, my own feeling is that, and I understand the barriers, people should have choices, because it's very difficult to say to someone, listen, you must take AstraZeneca, when the person is hearing that, listen, somebody got thrombosis and thrombocytopenia and got clots that went to the lungs and got clots that went to the legs and they lost arms. I have seen those patients. It's not that I haven't seen them. I have seen it myself. So all that I'm saying is that one of the ways to surpass that barrier is to make other vaccines available. When there's a mental barrier, you can't get past that unless you say to the person, okay, you don't want AstraZeneca? Okay, we'll get you this one. Are you more comfortable with it? Yes, then you get this one.
Yes, thanks a lot, Dr. Purcell. And the challenge with getting other vaccines, of course, is what's happening out there. Countries like Canada would have pre-ordered more than 5 times what their populations would require. So for small countries in the developing world, it's a real challenge. That's why we have the COVAX facility. And we hope that with time, other vaccines could become available.
Yeah, but Dr. Bernard, if I may just add, it's a real problem for the small islands, when the bigger countries are taking it. But what we are also saying here on this panel, at least what I am saying, is that AstraZeneca is still a very viable alternative. We understand the clots, and I'm not saying that we need to ignore it, but we need to kind of weigh everything from a risk-benefit analysis. So we have to kind of weigh everything. As the World Health Organization says, we weigh the risks and the benefits. And I definitely understand everyone may have a different preference, and people may prefer not to. And we really wish we could have more variety. But AstraZeneca, at this time, for the information that we have, is something that we can use for the time.
Yes.
The window.
Yes. Someone asked, and I would answer, does the church not have a responsibility to respect the state laws? And the simple answer is yes. We're about to bring the session to a close, but I want us...
Can I just say something, given that AstraZeneca has come up? Just you asked about the data, and I had to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm actually going to read. For the UK, our population is just over 66 million. And we've had 36 million first doses and 19 million second doses, of which, so that's 69.4% of the population and 38.2% for the second dose. and that includes 56 million doses of AstraZeneca, and we've had very, very few problems.
Okay, good. I'm coming back to each of the panelists so that you can have your final comments. But I want to say, in terms of certain scenarios that could happen in the future, if we think about a best case scenario, if Grenada continues as it is going, with very low incidences, and we don't have an outbreak, that would be very good. What would have to happen to guarantee that? If we don't have herd immunity, it means that we have to prevent, in terms of border controls, travel restrictions. It means as well that the protocols in terms of enforcement of wearing the mask. Where I am in Barbados here, there's a COVID monitoring unit that actually goes around to ensure that on the buses and the vans and the churches and the funerals, that people are complying with the protocols. So if people are hesitant and they don't want to take the vaccines, but at the same time they're not complying with the protocols, we may not have a best case scenario. Now, where we are now, it's good, but we are part of the world. The pandemic is still raging. We've seen what is happening in Trinidad. Just last week, we had 615 cases in one day, 21 deaths in one day. And you know, everybody's grandmother used to say, when your neighbor's house is on fire, what you're supposed to do? Wet yours. It means then a worst case scenario could be an outbreak in Grenada where there is community spread with a weak health care system, where there is breakdown. I don't want to see Grenada look like India. And it is possible because we are in a pandemic. So it means we have to prevent through managing the borders and so forth and protect. But I think the sentiment on the panel is that we can't legislate or coerce. It's about how do we provide information. Valuable, well-informed citizens can then make decisions. So I think this evening was very useful in terms of providing information so people can make informed decisions about the vaccines. So I want to invite all the panelists now to just take half a minute to give your final thoughts. If you have to speak to my dad, who is in Marianne now watching this program, how would you convince him and others like him, who may be elderly and not yet sure? What would you say to Grenadians?
Yeah, vaccination works. Vaccination works. And I know people sometimes think about long-term effects, but generally the side effects from vaccines you get within the first few months and not like 2-3 years down the road. So that should help people who are thinking about long-term side effects. So vaccination works. It's a way to combat COVID. And we thank God for what he has given us in these COVID vaccines.
Next, Dr. Purcell.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So what I would say to your dad is that he should take the vaccine. My guess is that he's probably beyond 65, 70. So my advice to him would be to take it. Now, the issue is that he may well have his own reservation in taking that vaccine because of what's on social media, because of what has been said about AstraZeneca. But I think the way to put the issue in context is the following. The risk of those thrombocytopenia and thrombosis side effects from AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, depending on which one, it's about 5 in a million. Grenada's population is not even anywhere close to 1 million. So I would say that if you're going to try to vaccinate maybe 100,000 people in Grenada, maybe you don't even come close to that risk, although you have to be mindful of it. But I think the benefits of getting it, of protecting yourself against a bad outcome from getting COVID, far outweigh the risk of those thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. That's what I would say to your dad, and that's what I would say to most people of his age.
Okay, thank you very much. Jackie McKenzie?
I think your dad should go and talk to my mum because she's just down the road in Woburn. And she's a Windrush nurse who worked in the NHS here for many years and very pro-vaccine. I think really, I agree with what Dr. Ronald Purcell there said about risks, the benefits outweighing the risks, and, the importance for self and knowing that the benefits outweigh the risks, but also the benefit for community and society. I think it's really, really important for Grenada. As I understand it, even though Grenada has very low incidence at the moment, there are some issues that if it doesn't have a better take-up on vaccine, that might well affect how quickly it can open up its borders and therefore safeguard its economy. And if the economy flounders, then so will people. We certainly don't want to go back to the days of extreme poverty. So I think it's really important for people to listen to the experts and not so much their friends and social media, and do the right thing.
Thank you very much. I think our other panelists had to leave. So Dr. George Mitchell.
Hi, Wendy. Dr. Purcell couldn't say it better. I have been on the ground. I have been speaking to people from all walks of life. Not only my grandfather, who is not alive, I wish he was, but I've been speaking to younger people as well. And the issue of risk is where all of that lies. I've been telling people that when you buy, for example, any box of medication, there's a long strip of indications what not to do and what the risks are. Everything has risk embedded, and the paper that you get within that box is extensive. The writing is so small that you don't even read it, but it is all there, the risk, and the risk of taking the vaccine and having an adverse effect is far negligible in terms of the benefits that it gives to you, your loved ones, and your population. So and your community. So that is a convincing argument, and that is what I've been saying to folks.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell. And my task now is to say thanks. What an afternoon it was. It was a very, very, very informative, educational, and engaging session. I want to thank the Minister for Health and Social Security, the Honorable Nicholas Steele, and the Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business and CARICOM Affairs, the Honorable Oliver Joseph, for their welcome remarks. I want to thank the panelists, Dr. Malara Alexis, Dr. Roland Purcell, Ms. Jackie McKenzie, Reverend Terence Griffith, Dr. Leslie Ann Williams, and Dr. George Mitchell for all the information that you shared with us. The objective of the session was to ensure that at the end, people can make informed decisions. And I'm sure after today, people will be able to make informed decisions. I also want to thank all our Grenadian sisters and brothers in the diaspora who would have sent their stories and given us words of encouragement. A special thanks to the organizers, the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Health, and in particular, the members of the Grenada Diplomatic Service in the capitals throughout the world. I really want to thank you for putting this all together. We hope that this evening would have really shifted the needle a bit in terms of helping Grenadians to see the importance of being vaccinated, but with good, credible information. Thanks to the support team for their assistance and to the various media platforms which carry the session. We really hope that we can do this again. But for more information on Grenada's efforts against COVID-19 and for all travel-related questions, please visit the Ministry of Health's website at covid19.gov.gd. The site is a resource to help advance the understanding of the COVID-19 virus and the vaccine. There you would find resources you can download and share, and a host of other news and information. Of course, I've been told to say that if you have not already done so, please like the ministry's page at Facebook Health Grenada to access the most current and accurate information on Grenada's COVID-19 initiatives and status. So continue to be safe and well. This is very important. You owe it to yourselves, to your families, to your community, to your country and region, to do the best that you can. We really want to thank the diaspora for this conversation. That was a conversation by Grenadians, with Grenadians, for Grenada. And we know this is a country we all love, and we want to ensure that we keep it safe and that we protect ourselves as best as we can. The vaccine is one measure, a very important measure, in fact, to ensure that we get the herd immunity that we need so that we could be safe, so that our economy could again thrive, and that Grenada could be the place that we all love and enjoy. So thanks to all of you, and we hope that we can do this another time, and may God bless you. I think this was a very, very good session, and I really again want to commend the organizers and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the host of this session this afternoon. So thank you very much, and God bless us all.
God bless you. Thank you.